Hello and welcome to the Executive Hub, the show that helps you grow your business with simple tips and strategies from successful entrepreneurs. We have another amazing guest today. My guest today is Brad Burns, and welcome, Brad.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Great to have you. And we're talking about navigating diverse markets. Let me do the proper introduction to Brad, and we're going to dive into a very interesting conversation about how he runs his. Brad Burns is a serial entrepreneur and the founder of Wayne Contracting, specializing in commercial construction. He also co founded a few other businesses across various industries from signage to seafood. And we're going to talk more about those. With a bachelor from University of Missouri and an executive master's from St. Louis University, Brad combines education with hands-on leadership. A dedicated husband and father, he lives in St. Louis, Missouri, and spends his spare time coaching his kids' sports teams. Brad, how's your day so far?
So far, so good. It's finally decent weather here in St. Louis. It's been a little bit
Oh, is that
cold since the beginning of the year, so it's nice to have a fairly decent day.
so kind of warmed up out there?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm up in Canada, and it's been kind of a warm year so far this year. I don't know what's going on with that, but it
Really, it's
kind of
been
warmed
cool out
up.
here. It actually snowed in Florida this year, so it was definitely a unique beginning of
Unique year.
2025.
Yeah, maybe the cold is moving down south. So how's your day so far?
Good, yeah. Like I said, it's actually been pretty hectic the last couple of weeks, so it's nice to take a couple of minutes and do some reflection.
Fantastic. So let's get started. What is your story?
Uh, you know, Probably like everybody else. I always knew I wanted to do something for myself and, running my own business. When I was younger, I just couldn't figure out what that was. Everybody always says like follow your passion. It's like you never worked a day in your life. All the things that I was passionate about weren't really going to generate enough money for me to support a family. So I had to kind of figure out, take the next step and just kind of, see what kind of presented itself to me. So started out my career in like commercial real estate finance. After graduating in '02, the market just kind of went, belly up in 2008. Had to kind of make a pivot to kind of figure out what my next step was going to be. Moved into working with an architecture firm doing business development, and then moved to a national general contracting firm. That's where I kind of got the exposure that led me to eventually move forward with my contracting.
Beauty, beauty. And then what inspired you to start Wayne Contracting? Was there a moment, a specific
You know what?
idea that
It
sparked
was
it?
an interesting. It was an interesting experience. I was working for a company, and I got hired by the then sales manager that decided to leave the firm. And when that happened, they brought in somebody new, and there was just a lot of, I guess, discontent with the existing sales group, business development group, and the new the new sales manager. And they ended up just getting rid of all the salespeople and starting over. So in April of 2014, after I got like a great Q1 review, it was like, all right, you're not going to hit your goals for the year. We need to let you go. So it was totally out of left field for me, kind of a situation. And at the time I had a couple of kids and needed to figure out a way to, move on to my next thing pretty quickly, or just kind of take this up and to do something on my own. So I guess the thing that kind of pushed me, I started looking for opportunities, trying to figure out what my next step was going to be. And I had a bunch of clients that we were looking to onboard at the previous company I worked at that just didn't meet their standards, that reached out to me and said, "Hey, we heard you left. Where are you going? We want to follow you. We kind of like how you operate and how you kind of handle business." And I said, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. I may just switch, markets altogether. And they convinced me to essentially manage some smaller projects for them until I could kind of figure out what my next step was. So I remember the first, typically you start a company like a contracting company, local, go regional, then national. It was like our first project was in South Dakota, so a little bit of a distance from St. Louis. It just kind of organically grew, and by the end of that year, it seemed like it made sense to set up an LLC, and we started getting some organic opportunities, and had enough runway to where it made sense to kind of see if there was something there. So I just decided to kind of go for it and see what happened.
Fantastic. Um, which one of these businesses that you own do you consider your main business?
I don't know if there is like a main business. They all kind of garner a fair amount of my attention equally. I mean, maybe not equally, but it depends on the year, and it depends on what we're trying to do with inside of each of those individual organizations. A few years ago when we started BizX in 2019, I dedicated like an entire year to really getting the thing off the ground. Um, So I would say that year it was probably 80% BizX and 20% the other companies that we had. So, it just kind of depends on the year, what our goals are. I mean, right now they're all kind of, I'm trying to do a better job of, it's just like when you have kids. I also have 5 kids. So it's like trying to manage, okay, how do I delineate my time between each of the kids? The same thing with the companies. It's how do I kind of pay enough attention to where I always am, in the know about what's going on, but not necessarily neglecting any of them individually.
That's very interesting. So how many companies do you own right now?
So we have 5, couple DBAs, and then the holdings company. And then
Okay.
some like
And then so how do you go about managing your time with 5 companies and 5 kids? And you also mentioned that you also coach your kids teams, sports teams as well. How do you go about
Yeah, I mean,
managing your time?
I don't, they've gotten to a point to where they've kind of outgrown my coaching skill set, so I don't do that quite as much as I had in the past. Luckily, the way that's kind of set up with me is I'm focused on work. My wife really manages everything with our household and the kids, and I'm OCD. She's really into spreadsheets. When she was working for a company here in St. Louis, she was managing like $80 million worth of buy for them, so she was always organized too. So fortunately, we kind of are, in alignment on those things. So in terms of like managing everything outside of work, she does a great job in kind of keeping us, afloat and moving in the right direction. And then in regards to the companies, like I said, I'm OCD, so everything is like really organized and process driven. We have really strict workflows, and to me, that's the biggest thing, in terms of starting a company and helping it scale. Is just being super organized and having a really defined process throughout the entire organization.
So what's a typical day like for you?
It kind of depends. Some days it's really low key, and there'll just be people coming in and out of my office all day asking me specific questions about the various companies. Usually there's a handful of meetings in there. Then some days, like the past couple of weeks, it's all hands on board kind of a deal. We've seen a significant amount of growth or opportunity this in Q1 2025 across the board with the organizations. It's kind of like an all hands on deck type of a deal.
Fantastic. Let's talk about how you, because I find it very fascinating how you manage 5 companies with 5 kids and all the stuff that you're doing. What time do you typically get up in the morning?
Monday through Friday, I get up about 4:45. I go to the gym. I'm usually at the gym around 5:15, and then I'll leave there 7:30, between 7:30 and 8, and shoot to the office. At the office usually from 8 to between 5 and 6, and then I'll go home. And I'm very fortunate that we have a ton of amazing people that work here for the different companies that allow me to have a ton of flexibility in my schedule. So if there's something I need to get to in the afternoon or midday or whatever, or if my kids have something in the morning, then it's not like it's rigid where I don't have the ability to also have a little bit of a work-life balance that allows me to invest and be intentional with their time as well.
Fantastic. Are your, say, days or time, is it compartmentalized as to here's what I do at different parts of the day or part of the week just to manage different businesses?
I'm not that rigid. I mean, typically in the morning, I'll come in, I'll get caught up on just minutia, so emails, and then kind of update my to-do list for the day. I
Okay.
have an organic to-do list. It's digital, so that's the other way that I kind of keep organized. Each company has its own like little tab, so I have a laundry list of things that I need to either accomplish or make sure get accomplished within the different organizations. So it'll either be myself facilitating those things or me kind of just checking in to make sure that they're getting done. And then from there, usually my day's typically kind of scheduled out for the most part. If I have free time, which is relatively rare, then I'll always just kind of keep knocking things off my to-do list.
Fair enough. Um, how did you go from owning Wayne Contracting and branching out to making it now 5 different businesses? How did that happen?
So we started Wayne Contracting in 2014, and I mean I can kind of give you like a little bit of insight in each of the companies if you want, like just kind of the
Sure.
decision making.
Yeah.
So that company was around for about 4 years, and we started doing some work for a national chain that had acquired 30 locations of another big box that was closing down to kind of marry the two. At the time, we were doing a ton of carpentry work, so we were doing smaller scale projects through Wayne Contracting. And for this specific client, we were operating on a handful of sites doing carpentry work. Everything was going great. They called me and said, "Hey, we have an issue with some graphics," and we'd done a handful of graphics jobs at that point, enough to where I kind of felt comfortable having a conversation about it. They said, "We have a challenge up in Minneapolis. This company just It's not going well. Do you have the ability to go up there and fix this? And being a young entrepreneur, you're like, yeah, I can do that. I'll figure it out, kind of a deal, because I'd done, over the last 4 years, kind of a deal. So I had somebody here who's now my partner in BizX. His name's Max Cork. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, Max, we've done a couple of projects you've helped me out with here in St. Louis. I got this, this project up in Minneapolis. They called me. They were having a challenge. Will you go up there and help me figure it out? So jumped on a plane, flew up there, knocked the project out. They called me back and said, hey, everything went amazing. Can you come back up here and tell us what we need to do? Like, how do we mitigate this from happening again? So I said, yeah, if you guys will pay for our travel, I'm happy to come back up there. Fly at me and Max are walking in. I look at him and I'm like, I have no idea what we're going to say right now. And he goes, oh, I got this. We're good. So walk in. It's the design company. It's the client. It's the manufacturer. It's the designer. And then the people that supply the material. So 3M. And, Max just started talking for 25 minutes. And he's like, here's what you guys use. Here's what didn't work. Here's what I had to do to make it work. Here's what you should have done or used. And here's why. And after talking for 20, 25 minutes, the person from 3M was like, you know what, that makes a lot more sense than what we did use. Let's do that moving forward. And I think we should be okay. And so they appreciated the suggestion, talked about the rest of the installation. They loved it. And then all of a sudden it was like, we want you to do, all of our graphic installations moving forward. And there was like 30 locations and it was a pretty fair amount of money. So it took me a little bit of time to convince Max to kind of give up the family print shop and move this direction. But, I feel like he made the right decision. Last year we did just under $8 million in revenue. So, and that was, that company was started in 2019. So not too bad of a runway. Concrete company, kind of a similar deal. We had some people that were working on a project at our house, wanted me to buy into an existing company, offered to do that. Didn't work out. They went in and say, hey, we don't want to work with you anymore. We're going to go work with this guy. And I was like, I don't even have any jobs. Like, what are you doing? They just said, we believe in you. We know you'll figure it out. So bought some equipment, spent a couple $100,000 on that. Just really hit my network hard, was able to get a handful of jobs. Also contacted some other companies that did comparable work and did a bunch of their overflow work just to generate revenue, keep the guys working, and then spent all the money that we made on advertising and, eventually kind of grew and took off. So it was both those companies started in 2019. In 2023, like I mentioned, we started the seafood company. And that was just a
So
situation.
sorry, was the printing company and what was the other company?
So BizX is signage and graphics. We do commercial work all across the country for bigger box retailers. And then the concrete company is we just do residential work here locally. So it's concrete, hardscapes, outdoor kitchens, outdoor fireplaces, patios, and we just added doing swimming pool installation this last year. And then, so those two were in 2019. In 2023, we started City Seafood, which is a wholesale seafood supplier that initially started out supplying wholesale to restaurants and country clubs here in the St. Louis metro area of fresh seafood. And then in the last probably 75 days, we started like a direct-to-consumer line where people can go on our website, order online. We'll either deliver it to their house or they come pick it up at our location in St. Louis. So the reason that company started was there was an existing company that probably had 50 to 60% market share that my partner in the company now worked at for 15 to 20 years. There was a situation where the building they were operating out of got eminent domain. So the government said, hey, we'll give you this much money for the building and you guys just move on somewhere else. We're basically telling you got to do it. It was for like a Costco development here in St. Louis. So the guy that owned it was, in his 70s. He didn't want to continue operating the business or relocated to operate it again. Just said, I'm going to just kind of call it a day. Mike reached out to me and we had some conversations and I just said, all right, if there's a gap in the market and there's an opportunity, like, let's just go for it. I don't know that much about seafood, but I'm willing to trust you. I've known you for, 10 years and let's just see what we can make happen. So we located a facility down in South St. Louis, built everything out and got operational at the end of 2023. And it's last year we did a little over $3 million in revenue, which is great for year one. I was, anticipating around that number. So it was great to kind of hit it. And then the last company is a company called Arch City, which does QSR franchise restaurant build outs and we'll own and operate the individual locations. So we're going to probably put 4 to 5 different concepts in the St. Louis area and just kind of grow a portfolio of those and kind of learn from it. And then with the intent to look and see if there's any opportunity to kind of develop our own franchise concept in a handful of years.
Wow. So the last one, do you guys build restaurants for franchises? Is that what you guys do?
So we're actually going to own and operate the franchises. So my construction company will do all the build out,
Oh,
and then we'll own and operate the individual franchise locations, and with the intent to build a portfolio of a few different brands to just kind of learn, the nuances, the everyday, day-to-day operations, distribution, those type of things, how the marketing works and the royalties and all that stuff. And so,
So I could see how there's like some common grounds between those businesses, but seafood is like a whole different ball game. Correct me if I'm wrong.
that's what everybody says. They said
And then
seafood.
you said
That
you
doesn't.
don't know much. You don't. You said you don't know much about it. How did you go into the business you don't know much about?
So I have partners in all the companies but the contracting company. So they're the knowledge experts. They're the technicians that have the experience. And essentially, what I bring to the table is just kind of general management. I understand. I do all the stuff that nobody likes to do, like dealing with accounting and accountants and taxes and insurance and all the stuff that is the least fun in owning a business. While those guys get to do the thing that they love, which is the signage and the concrete and the seafood and whatever else. So it's
Oh, so
it's
you do the back
it's a
end.
good partnership.
You kind of do the back end of the work and the admin work and nobody the stuff that you said nobody likes to do, and then they run the business and because they're
Yeah.
passionate about it.
Yeah, so we handle all the accounting, all the entity structure, kind of get everything organized and set up. Do whatever capital investment we need to kind of get the business moving, and then really focus on building internal workflow and workflow and processes.
Fantastic. So that seafood business, you said you bought it from the old guy that was retiring?
No, he just decided to shut it down. We bought his all of his equipment, all of his coolers, and relocated them to another building, and then basically hired a ton of his employees. So.
Oh, I see. And the first year you did 3 meals in
Yeah,
revenue.
last year I think it was either 3.2 or 3.3 million, give or take. So
That's not bad. Not
yeah,
bad for the first year.
I know that's what I tell you guys. I said I already made all the mistakes. When I was building Wayne Contracting for the first 3 or 4 years, I'm like I did everything wrong you could probably imagine, and I learned my lesson. And fortunately, I didn't go out of business by learning those lessons the hard way. So they don't have to. We don't have to replicate that when we're starting these new companies. So one of the other things that we're doing to kind of mitigate costs and allow these companies to kind of get up off the ground a little bit quicker in a more efficient manner is so we set up like a shared services model. So the holdings company that I have, essentially every employee for all the companies are employees of that holdings company. We basically kind of lease down as needed. Some of the employees only operate inside of one individual entity, but like the accounting people, they work for all the companies. So we just kind of parse their time. It allows us, instead of having to hire like a bookkeeper or somebody internal for accounting for that specific entity, and
Yeah.
take on a pretty significant burden. We can share costs. I've kind of found that like in that regard, you can get a higher level person in each of those individual roles. Instead of hiring like 5 different bookkeepers, I hire one controller and some support people. So they're more specialty, and I think in the long term, it makes us a little bit more efficient.
Love it. That's amazing. That is amazing. So that's a pretty efficient way to, you said you only have like 22 people across the entire network?
Yep, right now. I'm sure once we get
Wow.
restaurants going, we'll probably double or triple that number. But for the time being, yeah, we operate with 22 W2 employees.
Wow, that's pretty efficient. Um, you said that you learned a lot of things along the way. You did everything wrong and you kind of apply it to other businesses. Could you share some of the things that you learned along the way that you're now applying? And did you develop like a checklist, a framework or something? You're like, here are a few things that needs to be fixed or applied right away. We don't even think about
Yeah,
that.
well, I'm sure anybody that is watching that's an entrepreneur, they understand. Once you make a giant mistake and get punched in the face, it's not like you don't got to have a checklist. You just know like that's something you never do again.
Right.
um, so just a little bit about my background, just so you can kind of understand where I was initially coming from. So the first person in my family to graduate college, grew up in outside of St. Louis in like a farming community. Didn't necessarily have anybody that kind of lead the way in terms of like somebody that owned a bunch of businesses or had even been an entrepreneur at any point in my lineage. Didn't really have any mentors early on, and just kind of, like I said, I probably did a ton of things the wrong way. But I feel like I've learned a ton of lessons, and it's like you get these like automatic reactions, like nope, we're not doing that, we're not doing that. So I would say some of the things that I did wrong that for those first few years, probably the biggest thing in year one. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. Is I like I said, I never owned a business before. Well, I had a small couple companies, but they really weren't significant. So everybody has to have G&L insurance, and because we're doing contracting, we had workers' comp and all these other things. And I didn't realize because the person I was working with didn't tell me, like, at the end of the year, you're going to get an insurance audit, and you have to collect all this documentation throughout the year for all of your subcontractors and whoever else. So I had minimal, COIs for my subcontractors to kind of cover that insurance. So when we did an audit, I turned in what I had, and I got a bill for like $100,000 on like $450,000 of revenue, and I said, "There's no way that this is right."
Right.
So, with a bunch of back and forth over several months, we kind of figured it out. And I just, was very humble. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And obviously, there's no way that this is right. So they were willing to work with me and kind of figure it out. But for a little bit, it got a little contentious. I'm like, well, I'm not. They're like, well, just write us a check for this, and then we'll work it through it, and we'll refund you. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. A, because I don't have $100,000 that I can pay you, because I didn't even make that much on the money that we made for the year in revenue. And B, I know that if I do that, it'll take me months and months and months to probably get it back. So let's just figure it out, and we'll kind of go from there. So luckily, it was a path that ended up going. But that was a very valuable lesson early on, is be organized in terms of like collecting all that information. So that was a big one. Probably another one. I remember a specific instance where probably in year three, we were just doing a ton of work, and it was like a lot of rollout work. So it's small scopes of work on a high site count. So like one of the programs was like we do like Samsung projects inside of Walmart's. We're building like displays for them or whatever. And I remember there was a week where we had done so much work, and I was one of the ways that I kind of set this up to begin with, because when I started, nobody knew who I was. They didn't know who the company was. I didn't tell anybody that I owned the company, because I didn't want the responsibility of having to make snap decisions. So just because, like I said, I'm trying to figure it out as I go. And then I look to keep us as lean as possible. So I try to minimize our overhead. So that way, when we're operating throughout the year, there's as much capital as I need to kind of continue to pay guys and keep the company kind of going. So we always focus on being as lean as possible. And then the other thing was, these guys in the market, a lot of them were, they would get paid a certain amount. And I would always try to pay everybody 10 to 20% more than anybody else was willing to pay them, because A, I could afford to do it because I wasn't carrying all the overhead. And B, it would allow me to get guys and create loyalty from, being able to pay them consistently and pay them quickly. So a lot of these guys wouldn't get paid for like 30 days on some of these projects. I would try to pay them within 2 weeks. So that was the key to kind of getting off the ground and getting a real loyal group of people that would help me facilitate a lot of this work. Were those couple of things. But there was a couple of
Wow.
weeks where we had just a ton of money going out. I think I had to pay out like maybe $300,000 to $400,000 needed to go out. And it was like Tuesday, and I needed to pay this out by Friday for everybody to get it in their bank accounts. And I had like 150,000, but I had probably over $1 million in receivables. So I had to essentially call on some of my better, more loyal clients that have helped out a ton and been over backwards for, which, like the whole thing with like being a good partner really kind of came into play in that situation. Said, hey, I need you guys to pay these before Wednesday. I need this money in my account on Thursday morning, or else all the work that we're doing is going to stop because I can't pay these guys. So luckily we were able to kind of work through it, and they were able to help me out and kind of get us on to the next week. So
Wow. That's amazing. So a couple of things you mentioned was you were paying your team 10 or 20% more than the rest of the market, I guess. And then you said you were paying them within 2 weeks, where everyone pays like within 90 days, right?
it
Or
depends. I mean, sometimes it's 30 to 45 days is relatively standard. So
yeah. That's in the construction industry, right?
yeah, so it was like smaller scale work. So it wasn't like, a lot of it wasn't like big companies where you're dealing with hiring a large carpentry company. It was, a couple of guys that, worked for themselves basically. So they want to get paid consistently. If you did that, they would drive all over the country for you, which was amazing because we had work all across the country at this point. So it'd be like, hey, you're in Atlanta. I need you to go to Michigan next week and do like these 20 installs, and this is what you're going to make. And some of these people, they've been used to making 1,000, $1,200 a week, and I'm like, we're working in Walmart. You can work 24 hours a day. Like if you want to hit 15 locations, you can make 10 grand this week. So the ability to do that and to kind of set their own pace in terms of like what they're earning revenue wise, and also kind of manage themselves, um, it it made it very easy to have conversations like, hey, I need you to go do this for me because we paid you so much money this year that you're going to want to help me out no matter what. And it just garnered a lot of it's that combined with treating everybody with respect no matter who they are and what they're doing, because a lot of these people that were in those roles just, we're the last guy on the site, so we're, just kind of like, oh, you're there, just do it and get out of here, kind of a deal. So a little bit of respect went a long way in the early days.
Fantastic. It's like you rub their back to rub your back, kind of
Yeah,
like. Fantastic. What would you say are some of the milestones that you guys have achieved along the way?
Um, I would say early on with Wayne Contracting, you know, surpassing $1 million in revenue was an amazing feeling. Just not even knowing that that's what I wanted to do and doing it and being like, all right, now this is like a legitimate thing. Like this is an actual company that's, we're moving in the right direction. So that was amazing. And then getting these other two companies soon thereafter off the ground too was, and adding, going from one to three companies in 2019, that was a pretty tall order in itself. So getting those going and, having them be successful. And, both those have been around for 5 years, well, going on 6 years now. And Wayne Contracting is going on 11 years this year. So, passing those milestones too, the 5 and 10 year marks, not a lot of companies percentage wise make it to those numbers. So it's a great feeling to have multiple companies that have been able to kind of hit those things.
Fantastic. What would you say were some of the challenges that you faced while reaching those milestones?
Oh, I mean, name one, and I'm sure I've done it. From like not understanding how insurance works to being really tight, working capital wise. Going into a new market where I don't really know that much about, like seafood, for instance. Like that's not something I've done for 20 years, but getting to the point where I trust the person that I'm dealing with to say, all right, I trust that you have the knowledge, that you have the experience, and you trust that I can do what I say I'm going to do. I mean, some of it's proven. So, taking that leap of faith sometimes that's a significant challenge in somebody that you've known, but it can also cost you a relationship because it's somebody that you've had a non-business working relationship with for the last 10 years. So,
Very interesting. Um, what would you say is like holding you or your businesses back right now?
oh man, nothing. We're blowing up.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's going great. I mean, I guess maybe it's me. Maybe it's I just don't have the time to dedicate enough individual time to each of them to really push them to that next level. So, like I said before, I've gotten lucky that I've been able to bring some people into the company that are amazing at what they do and make it super easy on me. I feel like I'm kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Like I know a little bit about everything to where I can kind of what I tell people is I knew enough in the early days to kind of push the boat off the shore and start paddling. And I would look back and I would pray that if I wave, people would come swim out and paddle with me, kind of a deal. So I've been pretty lucky to have some good people that have jumped in the boat and helped me paddle.
Fantastic. So, with all these five companies, do you have like a marketing team that works with all of them? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so like we have somebody that kind of is like a jack of all trades that works in ops, and then kind of similar thing with marketing. You know, the I would say the commercial company, so Wayne Contracting and VizX, it's more. There's not a ton of marketing that's required because we work with commercial clients, so it's more of a business development type strategy. So it's we're going to knock on the door until you either give me a thumbs up or slam the door in my face, kind of a deal. And I guess that's probably in terms of like challenges. I would say going from those companies, like the concrete company, there was some commercial and some residential, but the market at the time was just amazing with COVID because everybody looked at their backyard and said it's terrible, so we want to spend money. So starting the seafood company and trying to go to like a direct to consumer market, it's been a little bit of a challenge trying to figure out the right marketing mix to be the most effective. So we're still in the process of trying a lot of things out. So I would say challenge wise, that's probably one of the bigger things we're facing right now. But we have some internal and external resources that we're trying to kind of utilize to maximize our return on those things.
Fantastic. So there's asked the questions. You said you were kind of running like multiple seven-figure companies, and I'm wondering how do you feed new business to these businesses that are growing like year over year? And like, is there like a team, or are you getting it organically because you guys are doing a good job out there? How do you go about expanding?
Yeah, so we started all the companies from scratch. None of them were acquisitions, and we've also, in the process of the last 10 years plus, have not ever acquired another company. So everything's kind of organic growth. It's just through sweat and tears, I guess, is what you'd probably say. So we're really focused on strategy and process. So what we do is we'll kind of cultivate a plan of action at the beginning of each year with what we want to target, who we want to target, and what kind of opportunities we want to develop, and either we'll go knock on the door until they slam in our face, or we'll keep pushing direct to consumer as much as we possibly can, and investing in marketing dollars to kind of generate opportunities and create a brand that has a following and some recognition.
Beauty. Brad, who would you say had a major influence on your business journey?
Um, yeah, that's a tough one. Probably the biggest person. I got a friend who's a couple years younger than me. We kind of got into all this together years and years ago. He has since his name's Patrick Daly. He's since moved to Virginia and is running a great company down there that does antique historical lighting called Crenshaw. And anytime that I have some sort of challenge or a question or something I need to talk about, he's my go-to person. So he's just a wealth of knowledge, super smart guy, way smarter than me. I feel very fortunate to have him as someone I can kind of use as a sounding board for sure.
So that guy kind of acts as your, like you said, sounding board.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and he kind of got going entrepreneurship wise a couple years ahead of me. So kind of like what I talked about with the guys that I'm partners with, I've already made all the mistakes, and he's kind of been down several roads that I haven't been through yet. And
Oh yeah.
we'll talk about those things and just kind of share the good, the bad, the ugly. And if there's something I can do to give him my opinion and let him do what he wants, great. If and vice versa. So it's been I would say as far as like somebody that's helped me out a ton over the last decade, he's the person that's done that.
Speaking of people who are ahead, what advice would you give people that are starting out right now?
I would say the biggest thing is just don't give up. I mean, everybody. It's challenging to be an entrepreneur, and sometimes you get to a point where you're like, man, it's not working. And maybe you give yourself kind of a goal or a timeline that you want to achieve a certain thing by. If you're close, keep going for it. I mean, you hear so many of these stories where it's like, I was doing this for 3 years and I was so close, and then all of a sudden something just popped and it just made more sense, or there was a small change. I mean, you just look at like branding. I mean, some of these companies have been around forever and haven't really generated a ton of revenue, and then all of a sudden they do something different with branding or marketing, and they quadruple in size or whatever. So the biggest thing is just don't give up. And there's going to be a ton of people that are going to tell you that you're never going to do it, and a lot of those people are just saying those things because they're never going to do it themselves. And while they they may be in your life and they may be supportive, I mean, ultimately they probably have their fingers crossed that you don't make it, because they'd rather see themselves in a better situation or whatever. Yeah, I mean, just don't let outside influences kind of impact your decision to go for it, and keep the course.
Fantastic. Great advice. I think a lot of people give up too early
Oh,
on,
100%.
on their dream and their business, and they tried for like a lot of people just think in their head. They don't even try. And they're like, I've tried it. I've tried everything. You're like, dude, what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things too for me. Everybody says, how are you able to do all this stuff? And I feel like the busier that I am, the more like instinctive reactions and decisions that you make, as opposed to
Hmm.
overthinking an opportunity. So if I mitigate or limit my ability to sit here and ponder things too long, then I feel like, typically your gut reaction is the direction you should go anyway. So I force myself to kind of be in that position where like, it's like, okay, here's the information. Here's what we're going to do. Let's just move on it and move forward. So,
Yeah. I like your comment about the busier you are. I think uh, personally, the busier I am, the more productive I am.
sure,
You know, I
100%.
think my brain just gets in some sort of a, what's the
Right.
word I'm looking for? Like a superhuman kind of mode. And then I tend to manage, like it's like right before you go on vacation, everything gets done. You know,
Right? Or it's right
because you
before
get
the housekeeper, the person, the cleaning person comes to your house and everything gets cleaned up.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Brad, are you a reader? Do you read books?
Yeah, I try to when I have time, for sure.
What would you say are two of your favorite books of all time?
Uh, Rich Dad Poor Dad, obviously that's a classic. And then the other one that I kind of like is Great CEOs Are Lazy, because it's kind of the
Great
truth. It's like
CEOs are.
lazy.
See, all right. Tell me more about that. That sounds very interesting.
It's you always see these people that are not always, but people that are successful entrepreneurs. A lot of times, it's people that just don't want to do something the hardest way possible, so they figure out a more efficient or more effective way to do something. And typically, it allows you to uh, scale something faster or build something bigger or whatever. So, I think not necessarily, I would classify myself in that. Like it's, you try to figure out the most efficient way to do something and you realize that everybody out there in the world generally wants to do things the easiest way that they possibly can. So if you can come up with a solution to figure out how to, be lazy and be effective, then it seems to be a good marriage, I guess.
Very interesting. Do you know who the author of that book is?
It's Jim Schlexer.
Oh, that's a hard name. I, you got good memory. There's no way I would have remembered that. That's a hard last name.
I got him sitting here on my desk.
Okay, cool. Um, any other favorite books?
Uh, I mean, the one by Napoleon Hill. Outside of that, I mean, those are the three that are kind of my
Think
go-tos.
and Grow Rich.
Yep.
Fantastic. Which one of these books made a biggest impact on you?
Probably Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one. I read it years ago too. That one has had a good effect on me for sure. Um, what's one advice that made a big impact on your life or business?
Let's see. That's a tough question. Big impact on my life and my business. It's probably, I would say when I was growing up, my parents, they really forced me, growing up on a farm, you just kind of got to get out and work. Um, they weren't entrepreneurs. My mom worked at Walmart for 40 years. My dad was a paramedic. Amazing people, worked hard. I think they really instilled like a critical work ethic in me, which has kind of helped me, burn through all these early years and not necessarily burn out or decide to quit. So I would say it's not necessarily advice, but just kind of showing you how to do that and how to be consistent and put everything you got on the line and work hard. That eventually something good will happen. So I kind of took that with me throughout all these companies in the last decade and kind of pushed as hard as I could just to see what we can make of it.
Absolutely. Consistency is another big thing that I think is missing, along with giving up too early
Yeah.
for a lot of people. Like, yeah,
Well,
and I'm guilty of that myself as well. You try something for like a week or two or three, and then you give up, and I sit down and wonder, oh, why didn't that work? Right?
right. Yeah. I mean, I say to a lot of people, I said, being a business today is not super hard. It's, you show up, you do what you say you're going to do, and everybody's going to make a mistake. So don't act like you're never going to make a mistake. So when you do, just say, hey, I made a mistake. Here's a solution, and move forward. And just be, like you said, be consistent in those things, and it'll garner you a ton of opportunities. I mean, people will respect somebody that's willing to show up, do the hard work, and then be humble enough to say, hey, I screwed up, and here's what we're going to do. So to me, those are like the baseline. It's like a pretty low bar to be successful.
Yeah. Just got to show up, be consistent, and get it done. You know.
Yeah, one hundred
Um,
percent.
I must admit, Brad, I'm really impressed with the business model that you have set up, especially with the say holding company and sharing resources between the companies. How did you come up with that idea?
Um, so I met with a company in 2019 that does PEO type work, and they essentially
Which
explained to
is
me.
what?
The company's called Insperity. So basically, what they do is they'll take all of your employees, move them to their employment pool to help them, basically, essentially help garner better benefits for your employees. There's a cost associated with that, which the concept made sense. We looked at it financially, it just didn't make sense at the time. But as you're kind of going through the process, I said, I mean, it does make a ton of sense. And maybe there's a way that I can kind of do this on my own on a smaller scale because financially, it was going to cost me more to do it that way than we were already doing it. So just, dollars and cents wise didn't make any sense. So just kind of researched a little bit and put the idea together and just said, all right, well, this is what we're going to do and just see if it made sense. Like 401k wise, if you run a 401k through each of the individual entities, it's going to cost you a few $1,000s per. Whereas if we have one in share, then we're just splitting the cost, which just kind of goes back to our ideology of kind of mitigating overhead as much as we possibly can to be as lean as possible and maximize the amount of working capital we can constantly have in play.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Amazing model. Like you have a successful company, you keep acquiring and buying and building other businesses, and you have a team that is managing and serving all the businesses, which is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it works
Beautiful.
really well, especially if you get the right people in the right roles. It makes it, and actually a fun environment to work in because, everybody can kind of tackle the project that they have and we all kind of chip. I mean, it's kind of like we kind of have like a family type feel. Everybody gets in, works hard, they're accountable. We all work outside of our job descriptions, because they're all small businesses. We razz each other and have fun, and try to just enjoy what we do together.
Beautiful. How do you guys go about accountability? Do you set up KPIs for your teams, or set goals, or how do you track people are doing what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, we have KPIs that are set up for various roles inside the organization, and then what we do is we have like a weekly accountability meeting, essentially, where everybody comes to. Each company has their own hour long or up to an hour window, if it need be, but typically they're done in about 30 minutes. They're going to go through, like for instance, the construction company. We talk about estimating, what project are we estimating. In that same organization, talk about business development, like what opportunities do we have, who do we have them with, what's our pipeline look like. Operationally, we discuss what jobs are going on, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like where are we at in terms of our timeline? Do we have any challenges we need to overcome? And then we have accounting on each of the calls, and they talk about accounts receivable and revenue and those type of things. So that way, everybody is in terms of like transparency, everybody knows everything that's going on inside the company. And typically, if you're good at what you do and you take pride in your work, you don't want to show up to one of those meetings and say, I have no idea what's going on. So, it's kind of maybe it's like a backhanded way to keep everybody accountable, or like an under the rug type of way. But, if you find the right people, they're super excited to come in and just kind of talk about what they got going on. So, it's a way for us to share and be transparent and kind of keep everybody in the know. And that way, like the salespeople will know what's going on. They know what's going on with all the jobs. They know where we're at in terms of estimating. And, it's like that through all the other organizations as well.
Fantastic. Love it, love it, love it. Brad, this was a great conversation. Is there a question that I should have asked that if I asked, it would have added value to the people that are watching and listening?
I think we're good, man. I think you did a great job, bud.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you and your businesses and reach out and get in touch?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me there. Just Brad W. Burns. And then if you want to go to our holdings company website, the theburnscos.com, THEBURNSCOS.com. There's actually a link through to each of our individual companies. So if there's a specific one you're looking for, it'll kind of direct you that way.
So the burn COS.
Yeah, THEBURNSCOS.com.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So again, if you're watching or listening, you want to get a hold of Brad, you want to do business with them, search him on LinkedIn, and theburnscos.com was the website, right?
Yep, correct.
Beautiful. Brad, thank you very much. This was a great conversation. I learned a ton, and you shared a ton of value with people that are watching and listening. Thank you guys for joining us on another episode of the Executive Hub Show. Your host, Mustafa Hosseini, yours truly, and my guest, Brad Burns. Hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye now.